All right, so first on our agenda is the swearing in of new board members. Dawn, do you want to lead the festivities?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. So we're really excited today to have a new board member joining us, Director Brant Anderson from the City of Lafayette. So if you could stand up. And let's see, there's Brant. There you are. I'm hiding in the corner. So all you have to do is raise your right hand and repeat after me. I have a feeling you've done this before. All right. I, Brant Anderson, do solemnly swear or affirm
I, Brant Anderson, do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
That I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you very much and welcome to the board.
Welcome. So, Brad, I got to say, it's good to have you here and some good sense from the city of Lafayette, because you're the first person I've ever heard get sworn in who I think actually did it correctly.
Yes,
When we get to that section, swear or affirm, and everybody says, and I swear or affirm, and you, sensible man, picked one. So congratulations.
The first time I got sworn into the city council, they asked beforehand, do you want swear or affirm? And I said, well, affirm. And she didn't swear, and so I had to.
There are a whole number of issues revealed in that, right? All right, well, that's great. Well, good to have you, and I hope you will correct us in other ways and we'll do things more properly. So I'd like to go around the table tonight. We actually have a number, not only a new member, but we have a number of alternates, and I think it would be helpful if we went around the room, each of us introduced ourselves, the city we're from, and then you can say what your day job is or some other interesting fact about yourself. And let's start over there. Oh, with, yeah, it always happens when you have that popcorn. Brad.
I'm Brad Wagon-Connect. I'm on the Napa County Board of Supervisors, and I'm obviously representing Napa. Greg Lyman, El Cerrito, Mayor.
Sasha McEntee, Councilmember, City of Philadelphia.
Brant Anderson, City of Lafayette, City Council, and I'm a lawyer now, but for 15 years in the past, I was an industry researcher.
Fantastic.
I'm Emmett O'Donnell from Tiburon. I'm Jim Andrews from Corte Madera, and I'm filling in for Sloan and Diane, neither of them correct.
Fantastic. Welcome, Jim. So you're sort of the double alternate?
I'm the alternate's alternate.
The alternate alternate. That's great. I'm Kate Sears. I'm in the Marin County Board of Supervisors.
I'm Denise Athos, Mayor Pro Tem City in Novato, and my day job is I'm a real estate broker and have my own company in Novato.
And I'm Matt Brown. I'm subbing for Ford Green, council member from San Anselmo. My day job is also a real estate broker,
Super. Welcome, Matt.
commercial.
And I'm Peter Lax. I'm the alternate for Fairfax for Barbara Kohler. And my day job, I'm an employment attorney.
Super.
My name is Genoveva Calloway. I'm a council member with the City of San Pablo, and I'm a retired county worker as a clinical social worker.
Ray Withy, City of Sausalito, currently Vice Mayor.
Bob Simmons, City of Walnut Creek, currently council member.
Fantastic. Great. Super. It's good. August is good. We get a lot of alternates who we don't get regularly. So thank you for being here. All right. Any board member announcements of any sort, other than what we just did? Seeing none. Time for public open time. Anyone from the public who'd like to talk on matters not on our agenda, and you can go up to the microphone even. Welcome.
Dawn, I have a handout for everybody at this table here.
Okay.
If you could pass those around.
Problem. You take one and pass it on.
This is
Welcome.
my first time before your board.
Super. Would you tell us your name?
My name is Wynn Scott Stokes. Normally I've gone for 68 years as Scott Stokes, but Now that I'm retired, I'm going to call myself what I'm going to win Scott Stokes. My mother would be very happy with that. I'm an industrial engineer. Hello, hello. Thank you. Hello, hello.
I think you did.
By training, I'm an industrial engineer and deals with human factors engineering. And I was a missile technologist in the U.S. Army for a number of years, staff sergeant. And I'm really glad to be here, and I want to congratulate you people. You are dealing with the most important topic ever: global warming, generation of solar energy, renewable energy, the most important thing we can address ourselves. And everything you do and say and direct yourselves in every manner possible has to be directed towards solving global warming. First of all, I was a real smart guy, and I put in solar panels. And I put in as many as I could possibly get in, okay? And subsequently got a wonderful charger from ChargePoint, which called as a home charger, and I bought a great new Soul EV car just recently. And I bought it immediately after hearing Dale Miller. Who is he? He is the president of the Golden Gate Electric Vehicle Association. And if you ever get a chance to listen to him talk about global warming, he was up at the Civic Center. I tell you, you'll never want to drive a gas, diesel-powered anything in your life again. Denmark won't sell you any car in the state of Denmark after 2025, and there's more chargers in England, electric, than there are gas stations.
Mr. Stokes, I want to warn you, I'm only going to give you 3 minutes, and you're into that time, so
Okay,
just so you know.
okay. That's the macro appearance, but what happens to dealing with people in their homes? Yes, we put in LED lights, we've done gas-fired water heaters, flash hot water heaters, but people don't know if they're on their time of use, you know, and energy metering. You have to explain to them and their kids and their wife, by the way, don't run the gas, don't do your close at 7 o'clock. This rate schedule that you publish on your website lists all these pages of, you know, what R6, R5, whatever rate you are on. You got to find it, and then it breaks it down to summer and winter, and then it has to break it down to peak, off-peak, and part peak, and then you got to look at the times. You'll never figure it out. But wait, I didn't go to school for the best schools for nothing. What you have in front of you is an example.
That's great.
And you put this on the refrigerator. You can read this, not this, but you can read this across the room from your breakfast table. Oh, Helen, don't do the laundry, wait till 10 o'clock or, you know, 9 o'clock or whatever. And this is weekday, weekends, AM, PM. Don't worry, I ran through about 3 other ideas on how to get this done from the refrigerator. Finally, I struck on this. I strongly suggest that Marin Clean Energy, I don't know if you've seen this, Dawn, I tried to push it through the channels, so I decided to come from top down. And I suggest under each rate, you click on graphic PDF. Bam, with a little thumbnail, so they get an idea what's coming. And
I'm going
anybody
to
have
ask
any
you to
questions?
wrap up, because I gave you some extra time, but I think your chart is fabulous. And sometimes it's good to start at the top.
Yes. And I love it myself.
It's really-
The thickness, the variance.
It's really great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
All right, it sets a high bar for,
Best you'll ever see.
oh my gosh, there's someone who's brave enough to follow that fantastic presentation. Welcome.
I'm Brian Copperell from Mill Valley. I'm probably one of your newest customers. I just relocated with my family from Cambridge, Massachusetts, so we're very happy to
Welcome.
be here.
Fantastic.
And nice to see the offering
Yeah.
of MCE as a default,
bet.
which of course we didn't opt out of. I'm in the solar energy business in Massachusetts, the Wild East, and I just wanted to pass on a couple of thoughts for your consideration. Number one, in Massachusetts, on the Massachusetts Turnpike, I don't know if you all have traveled back there, probably not so many of you, but there are many solar facilities that the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has installed along the interchanges of the highway, of the Mass Pike. I would submit for you, since you both have a local energy challenge, as I understand it, of course. You're beginning in Nevada, as I understand it, with some solar projects, but you're trying to get more. And these are natural places to put solar energy facilities. Obviously, you get into the wade of local siting and planning for how to do that, but I'm sure that between your county and various towns, there may be ways to push that agenda. So I just put that out there. I think people should be confronting their energy usage everywhere they go. We've got a lot of cars out there. I just drove from Mill Valley to get up here. There's a heck of a lot of cars looking at these things, and they're not looking at anything on the side of the Route 101. Another idea I wanted to put to your consideration is, I think I saw somewhere there in your reports that, maybe I'm mistaken, but that there's a large future expectation of owning your own facilities. And I just wanted to, obviously I have a solar energy development bent, but there's a lot of efficiencies for third-party private ownership of these facilities, not the least of which is federal tax credits that are incentives that public entities like yourselves don't get to take advantage of. So the cost can be reduced by third-party ownership, and I think it may be wise to consider being the powerful source that you are, which is a PPA off-taker, which is incredibly valuable, sets the agenda. You can have an RFQ for developers to come on out, show their qualifications, and they will do it. They're in the business. There's a lot of great solar companies in California. And I think just wanted to echo what the other gentleman said about electric vehicles and charging stations. It feels as though there's a sort of classic public goods failure that's waiting to happen. The Teslas of the world will do their own micro, private facilities that won't be open. And maybe the charge points of the world will get the job done, but right now they're not anywhere near what all of us who would like to drive a Chevy one day or some other car that are going to be open sourced, hopefully. And you all would seem to be a natural source of putting the funding together for those facilities. Now that's something to own, and then be explicit about charging the public for their use, because obviously there's no free lunches. I think maybe I saw one of your EV notices that suggested that maybe we'll be a little ambiguous, maybe we'll charge or not. No, great, make the deal. And MCE should be the means for that capital source. But
Super.
anyways,
Great. Thank
really
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Welcome to Marin, and thanks for being here at MCE. Appreciate that. No, you only get one bite at that apple. No, I'm tough.
And
No.
I thank you for paying me so much money during the day, and I can buy it back cheap at
All
no
right.
quarter of the
No,
rate.
seriously, I mean it. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak in public open time on matters not on our agenda? All right, seeing none, next on our agenda is a report from our Chief Executive Officer, Dawn.
Just a couple of items this evening, and again, a warm welcome to our newest board members, Director Simmons from Walnut Creek, who was sworn in at our last MCE meeting, Director Anderson from Lafayette, and our visiting alternates and council members. Really appreciate y'all being here. I wanted to let folks know that outreach in our new communities is going very well. As you all are probably well aware, we begin cutover for our newest communities on September 1, and that cutover will be occurring on the meter read date for each customer throughout the month of September. So by the end of September, we'll be fully enrolled in those communities. We've been doing a lot of events and meetings. Our public affairs team has been really busy with many events every week, and if you're in one of our newest communities, you're probably seeing a lot of media and MCE tables at any farmers markets and events that you're at. But we're seeing a lot of good response, positive response, and we're also seeing very strong interest in our Deep Green program. Just to create a little friendly competition, I wanted to let folks know that Walnut Creek is our leader in Deep Green signups. We have over 200 signups since we began the enrollment process. But as far as percentage goes, American Canyon is actually the highest percentage there on the Deep Green front. Lafayette is I'm sorry, I misspoke. Lafayette is the leader on the deep green percentage, so congratulations to you. And we're really excited to see the interest in deep green in these communities, as well as the positive response as far as participating in the program. The next item is I just wanted to remind folks that there's no need to move the microphones when you're speaking, but do make sure that the mic near you is on and it has a green light going around it. You can do that by pushing the button down at the base to get the light green, and you may need to lean into the mic, but you don't need to move them around. That can sometimes backfire on our audio person in the back room there listening in. I wanted to let folks know that we have our annual retreat coming up on September 29th. That's going to be at our usual location in Ross, but we are open to new communities for our next retreat next year. But we'll be in Ross this year. You probably already received a save the date for that day, but you may want to jot it down just to make sure it's on your calendar. It is expected to go from 9 to 4. Sometimes we get out a little early. And if you have a particular topic that you'd like to see covered at the retreat, now is a good time to let me know. We are developing the agenda right now. It'll be similar to prior years, but we do have room for some additional items at this point. And then planning way ahead, just wanted to put out a save the date for our holiday party that's going to be a little earlier this year than usual. It's going to be on Friday, December 9th from 6 to 11 p.m.
That's planning, Dawn.
I know. Well, Darlene's on top of it. I can take no credit there. She's ahead of me on that. Excuse me. Location. That one's going to be in San Anselmo, actually Fairfax, at the Deer Park Villa. Yep. And with that, we can move on to the next item. I just want to do just note that we often take up discussion items at the end of the agenda, but we're mixing things up a little bit tonight because we have so many new visiting board members. We wanted to provide a little bit more content up front, and we have two really interesting discussion items that we'll be taking on before some of our action items. So with that, I am happy to take any questions.
So I just want to acknowledge City of Lafayette and that great work on deep green signups. We were bested by El Cerrito when they first came on board, and so now, Greg, you see how it feels to be bested by a new...
I think she was just comparing the new
El Cerrito may still be number one. We can do that comparison for next time.
And I think Walnut Creek wants to correct me.
No,
No?
I was going to add something if I
Okay,
could.
please.
Dawn's comment about the outreach is correct. It's working in Walnut Creek, and this is the third letter to the editor, but this one starts out by saying Simmons is wrong about renewables. So the word is getting out. So.
That's great. Super. Other items, questions, comments from board members? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the consent calendar. We have 5 items on consent. Is there any item that a board member would want to comment on, or a member from the public wants to comment on? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Do I have a
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions?
Abstain on C1.
Okay.
Abstain on C1.
Okay, abstain on C1. Okay. Anyone else? No? Great, thank you. All right, on to item 6 on our agenda, which is board member assignments to committees.
Great,
Go
so
on.
I can introduce this item. We have an opportunity because of the size of our board has increased in the last couple months. We have room for additional members to join in the executive committee or the technical committee. We also had one member on our technical committee depart from our board, and so that has created a vacancy. But I want to clarify, it may have been confusing if you just looked at the information in your packet regarding where there was a vacancy. We actually do have room based on the new members that we now have on our board. We do have room as far as quorum requirements to add a member to our executive committee, or up to 2 members, and our technical committee we could add up to 3 members. So there's no need to add a member tonight, but I wanted to make sure folks know that there's an option available. We do have some guidelines that we established to encourage folks from new communities, particularly counties that aren't yet well represented on our executive committee or our technical committee, to consider joining before we add more folks where we have heavy representation in any county. So I want to put that caveat out there as well. So if you're from a community that is new, you're extra welcome to let us know if you're interested in one of these committees. And if you'd like to kind of wait and test the waters for a while, this is also something that we can take up in future meetings. So with that, I'll leave it up to you all to nominate yourselves or a counterpart.
And I'd echo that encouragement for folks from our new communities to join. I chair the technical committee, so I'm always particularly encouraging people to join that committee. I think it's the best. And you really get into the heart of the operation. So I hope that everybody will give that some thought and join us. So there's nothing wrong with the executive committee either, but TechCom is where the action is. All right. So Dawn, is there any time that you'd encourage people to get back to you, or you hear back in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think that we can, if no one's interested in putting their hand up now, we will have this on the next month's agenda. And in the meantime, anyone who's thinking about it could come sit in on one of those committees and give it some more thought.
Super. Great. Thank you. And what are the dates of our next committee meetings? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, so our executive committee always meets on the first Wednesday of the month, so that will be held on the 7th of September from 10 to 12. And then our technical committee currently, landed on Labor Day. So we moved it to the 12th, which is the following week, and that's also going to be a morning meeting, 10 to 12. And also want to let folks know that if the time of the meeting presents a real problem, but you're interested in participating, please let us know anyway, because we've made it a practice to accommodate the needs of the committee members in setting the time, and we can always make adjustments as needed.
Great. Thank you. All right, so next is our regulatory and legislative update. This is one of the items that often we do at the end of the calendar, but we're moving up tonight, which I think is a great idea.
Right, and we're going to hear from Mike, who's part of our regulatory team, works on a lot of our energy efficiency proceedings, and is also involved in a lot of other regulatory efforts. So he's going to give us an overview of the activity on this front. Mike.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. My name is Michael Callahan Dudley. I'm Regulatory Counsel. I just want to say that it's an honor to be here before the board. It's been almost 2 years since I was first introduced to the board, and it's been a tremendous privilege for me to represent MCE and our member communities in that time. So diving in, I'm going to give you a regulatory and legislative update and one wonderful presentation. The regulatory update is going to include 3 broad areas. The first is a proposed decision on PCIA, specifically on the vintaging issue. Second is PG&E's general rate case. And the third is PG&E's Diablo Canyon application. First, the proposed decision on PCIA vintaging. The Commission, California Public Utilities Commission, has issued a proposed decision that would assign a vintage for CCA customers, but it's based on the service area as opposed to the individual customer. And this would mostly fix an issue where individual customers would move around and be assigned a new vintage as they moved around, and create sort of a never-ending PCIA for those customers.
So Mike, can I stop you for a second? Because
Yes.
we have some alternates here tonight who are not necessarily here frequently. It might be really helpful if you just briefly would explain what PCIA is all about.
Yeah, definitely. So the PCIA stands for the Power Charge Indifference Adjustment. And this is a fee that's assigned to customers that leave investor-owned utilities. So customers that have left PG&E and are part of a CCA have to pay this fee back to the investor-owned utility to cover the costs of some of the contracts they procured on that customer's behalf. We have a number of issues with this fee. One of them is vintaging. And we're working with the Commission to address these issues. We're fortunately able to make some progress on the vintaging issue. And the vintaging, just to give you a little flavor of what that means, there's a year assigned, a vintage, if you will, for each customer, and hopefully once the decision is final, it'll be for the service area, and the contracts that they're responsible for compensating the utility for based on that year. Any contracts that were initiated and executed during that year, in that year, before that year, that were still valid. So that's a little taste of a complex and really important issue for CCAs. The final decision we were expecting this month, but it was actually held during the voting meeting today, and we may see it voted out next month. Second issue, PG&E's general rate case. There are 3 particularly significant points that I'm going to cover. The first is some good news. The PG&E is proposing to significantly reduce CCA service fees, which were going to result in some substantial savings for MCE. The other 2 are unfortunately troubling. There are rate changes that creates some potential impacts for solar customers as well as customers with electric vehicles, and I'll give you an example for each of those to illustrate what some of those impacts are. First, talking about the good news, the reduction in service fees. There's a fee that MCE is responsible for paying PG&E, and this is for each account each month. And last year that fee was 44 cents each account each month. They're proposing next year to drop it to 21 cents. And you can imagine that's a substantial savings. We penciled it out there at about $700,000 per year for MCE. We have our own John DeLessie to thank for negotiating the methodology that led to this decrease. Next, the impacts for customers with rooftop solar as it comes to the rate changes. And here, the big takeaway is that if these rate changes go into effect, the economics for rooftop solar are going to go down. And you can see in 2016, the peak period where the rates are the highest was when the sun was shining. So customers are getting credited at a high rate as their solar panels are generating. You can see for 2017, they're proposing to move that period essentially to when the sun is not shining, and they're reducing that peak tremendously. And so for customers like our members of the public that have invested in solar for their rooftops, this changes the economics on the decision they've made, and we're working to engage on this, and hopefully getting some advocates engaged as well. Second illustration here for the impact on electric vehicle owners. What I want you to draw your attention to is the rate changes on the far right. And what you're seeing is a bit of a leveling. They're bringing down the peak, they're bringing up the off-peak and the partial peak. And what this means is that customers aren't going to save as much money if they're charging overnight. It's going to cost them more to charge overnight, and they're going to be saving less than they would compared to charging during the day. So again, this affects the economics for electric vehicle customers.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about why the PG&E is pushing for these changes? It seems very counterintuitive to those of us who would like to see more solar and more EV use because of climate change issues. Is there a context that might explain what's going on here?
Yeah, on the regulatory team, we're equally puzzled because we've been sending a message to these customers about how to behave, and now we're changing the game. My perspective, and I'll invite Jeremy to supplement it, is that PG&E is spending a lot of money because customers are doing what people ask them to do, and it's eroding their revenue. And so they're trying to make tweaks around the edges to their rates to minimize that.
Yeah, just to quickly chime in. So just to quickly chime in, I'm Jeremy Wayne, Senior Regulatory Analyst for MCE, and I get to be the one that dives into all these numbers and makes sense of it. And all of the changes that PG&E is proposing in this phase 2 are under this guise of cost of service. What they're seeing is that there's so much more renewable generation coming on during the daytime, and the demand is actually shifting to later and later in the day. So there's this disconnect between when the power is being created and when people actually want the power. That's creating the duct graph, the duct chart that some of you may be familiar with from the ISO's reports. And it's becoming a big problem for the utilities, both in terms of timing their generation to sync up with demand, and then also in terms of cost of their grid infrastructure and the bandwidth of their grid infrastructure too. They're seeing increased congestion in the evening hours versus during the daytime where there's less demand on the grid. So it's all under the guise of cost of service, but as Mike was pointing to as well, it's very much the adoption of solar is certainly cutting into their ability to sell the power that they've contracted for already. The EV is very counterintuitive, though, because they should be encouraging as much as they can the adoption of EVs, because that's creating more load for their excess generation that they're finding themselves with. So this is perplexing.
Yeah.
The third issue in the regulatory update, is there another question?
Greg Lyman, El Cerrito. But wouldn't this just push people to do better programming of their charge? I mean, they basically would drive their charging to be after 1 a.m.? Or is the 1 a.m. charge also an increase?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, the 1 a.m. charge is an increase from 11 cents to 15 cents. And I don't have the second start of the other partial peak. I think it starts at 6 a.m. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong.
Jeremy has a good answer for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
So the times that are up here are actually, they're changing. These are the new times, and the old times, the off-peak started much earlier in the evening. So there's still an opportunity to charge during the off-peak during the evening. As Mike was saying, the new off-peak will be 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. or so, or 6, I think it's long, anyhow, to a later period in time. But the dilemma is that there's a mismatch between what's in the rates and what people can actually practically do. You know, if you've got to get up and go to work by a certain time, there's a certain point where you have to pull the plug on the car and get in the car and use it. So if you're really trying to program your car to optimize only charge on off-peak period, your window of time between 1 a.m. and then if you're getting out the door at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., that's a much narrower window than if that off-peak started at 10 p.m. So it's becoming harder and harder for it to be practical for EV owners to charge their cars fully in the evening time.
In an off-peak time.
In an off-peak period.
Yeah, Brent.
Yeah, you mentioned that because renewables come on during the day more often than not, that the peak is shifting. So the overall peak is not shifting, it's just PG&E's peak is shifting to a different time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there are a number of trends on the grid that cause the grid's peak to shift. That could be PG&Es, that could be MCEs specifically, and so these, as Jeremy was saying, these changes are an attempt to sort of continue to track that and continue to recoup rates that provide the utilities the ability to provide service, to the cost of service rate making. So yes, they are changing. Yes, they're changing for PG&E, and this is one attempt at trying to address those changes.
Any other questions? Yeah, Peter. Hey.
To what degree would our rates be tied to PG&E's rates if they get a rate change approval?
Great question. So as many of you know, MCE's Board of Directors has independent jurisdiction to set rates. Traditionally, what MCE has done is tracked the structure of PG&E's rates to make it simpler to compare the rates for customers. We don't necessarily track the same price per kilowatt hour. For example, with our net energy metering customers, we actually compensate them above what PG&E would compensate. So we have discretion, but our behavior has been to track the general structure, and so it's very likely that we would track the peak period, when those would start, when those would stop. We may select different rates per kilowatt hour.
Could we craft like a special rate structure for electric car owners, for example, to sort of shift when the peak loads are?
Yeah, I mean, the Board of Directors, again, has its own jurisdiction to craft any rate schedules it deems appropriate. I think it's a substantial consideration to avoid customer confusion and to allow a bill comparison that we're required to put out each year and to make that clear to customers. But absolutely, and I believe currently we do have an electric vehicle rate that provides additional incentives because of that extra usage.
John DeLisi, do you want to jump in here?
Just add, there is a practical limit for us to have different time of use periods for residential customers, and it's because we rely on PG&E to provide the usage data that we use for billing those customers. So it's not the case for large commercial. We'll actually get hourly data for those large customers, but for residential, we'll get time of use data. So, and it'll be based on PG&E's time of use periods. So it's really not possible for us at this point in time anyway to have a different, rate structure. We can have different prices, but not time of use periods.
Thank you. Other questions at this time? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Mike?
I want to,
Dawn,
I'm sorry, before we
sorry.
switch to the next topic, I just want to point out one thing, because I know that a lot of council members get questions from net energy metering customers from time to time, and so I just wanted to explain that sometimes the interest of our net energy metering customers can be a little bit at odds with the actual cost of service, and I think we're seeing that. If you can go back one slide, Mike. Yeah, to this one, you can see how the shifting there is related to the really big increase in saturation in the market of renewable energy, including large renewable energy projects across the state, but also rooftop solar that we're seeing across the state. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of generation happening in the middle of the day when it's sunny, so much that sometimes there's not enough load to absorb all of that. And so these time of use rates are shifting to later periods because that's when the sun goes down, but people are coming home, cooking dinner, and that's when a lot of load demand comes onto the grid. So I think it's helpful for us all to understand that it's not a black and white issue. There's kind of a give and take that needs to happen as we're evolving and getting more renewables integrated onto the grid. It might be a little bit painful, but some of the incentives that were provided initially to our net energy metering customers may not continue to be quite as strong as the state is working to accommodate more renewables onto the grid and creating price signals and benefits for those that can reduce their load during those evening hours. So that's just part of the picture I wanted to bring up.
Right, and it may be, do you think this provides an additional incentives or is a driver for enhanced storage capability, which is something obviously that folks have been working on for some period of time, but I'm thinking some of these rate adjustments may add an additional incentive for entities that are working on storage. Yeah,
Help make
certainly
those-
for all of us wanting to have the storage.
Yeah, it could help make them more economic.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, okay, Mike, you're on.
Thank you. All right, so the third piece on the regulatory update is PG&E's Diablo Canyon application. And PG&E recently filed an application. There's three sort of major components to it. The first piece is they're proposing to close Diablo Canyon by 2025. And many of you may know that Diablo Canyon is California's last operating nuclear power plant. They're also proposing to pay for employee and community costs and replace the generation from Diablo Canyon through achieving energy efficiency and going out to procure greenhouse gas-free electricity. The key issues for CCAs with respect to this application start with the energy efficiency proposal. PG&E is getting a bit of an unfair benefit if the proposal gets approved as adopted because it sidesteps a lot of the rules and rule framework for the existing energy efficiency programs, and it excludes CCAs from being able to provide projects and achieve that energy efficiency. The second and potentially much more significant piece is they're proposing new CCA fees to pay for the GHG-free resources and renewable portfolio standard energy that they're planning to procure and provide to their own customers. And this is particularly puzzling because MCE currently exceeds PG&E both on the GHG-free resources and on RPS content and has more aggressive long-term goals. So there's a huge logical question about why should our customers be paying to help them underachieve what we're doing, and that's something we're planning to dig into. That concludes the regulatory update. I'm going to move into the legislative update. And I've listed here the bills that we've been tracking, and I also want to provide a little context that the deadline for getting bills in this legislative session to the governor's desk is the end of day, August 31st, and as many of you know, that can creep into the early hours of September 1st, and we'll have Shalini Swaroop to thank for tracking that. And I'll go through each of these bills and provide a bit of an overview. First and foremost, AB 1110, Assemblymember Ting is the author. This bill is about calculating greenhouse gas emissions for annual customer disclosures, reporting out the greenhouse gas content of our electricity. And I first want to state that Senator Wolk and Senator McGuire have been working diligently to address the challenges for CCAs that are embodied in this bill. And what it was originally trying to do is basically create two types of GHG accounting, and the result is confusing, it's complex for customers, and it's inconsistent with existing RPS law. And before 5 p.m. this evening, we opposed this bill, but we were able to suggest some amendments that we were told would be accepted, and as of 5 p.m. removed our opposition. And Don may want to provide some additional detail, but we're excited to see the amendments in writing. Yeah.
Our biggest concern with this bill was that it was very prescriptive in nature, and it was directing the California Energy Commission to come up with a greenhouse gas methodology, but prescribing a methodology that really didn't conform to best practices in the market. Our letter of opposition requested a stripping down of essentially all of the bill, except for a couple of provisions that directed the California Energy Commission to open a open, transparent process, and through that process determine what greenhouse gas accounting methodology would be the best approach for the state of California, and then apply that methodology to the power content label, which we are already used to participating in the release of that power content label. And so I believe we were successful in stripping out the concerning language in the bill and the language that really conflicted with existing law, such as the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And we're hopeful that the CEC process will be a much more thoughtful, comprehensive process that will incorporate really the best thinking about how greenhouse gas methodology should be conducted going forward, and it would take effect in a couple of years. And we would have a chance to participate in that process, as would many other market participants and community groups. So we're looking forward to participating in that, and it appears that, after a lot of back and forth with the author's office and I need to offer thanks to all of you who participated in reaching out to our representatives in Sacramento. It really had a big impact, particularly in the last week, of creating a momentum where the author really felt like he needed to take our amendments in order to prevent the bill from dying. So I think we have a big win on this bill, and we're looking forward to seeing the amendments in print tomorrow.
Great.
Thank you, Dawn. The next bill I'll cover is AB 2868. Assemblymember Gatto is the author. This bill is about cost shifting for installation of distributed energy storage systems, and these would be installed by investor-owned utilities. And originally, this bill would allow the investor-owned utilities to recover the costs for these systems from all transmission and distribution customers, PG&E customers and MCE customers. The challenge, though, energy storage systems, it's pretty easy to imagine. They provide some benefits for transmission and distribution, but they also provide generation benefits. They can dispatch energy. And if transmission and distribution customers are paying for those generation benefits, they're subsidizing PG&E's generation. And we were able to work with the author to get language added to the bill that would allocate costs both to transmission and distribution customers, but also to generation customers. And this would be based on the proportion of benefits. And one wonderful thing we're hoping will come out of this is that the CPUC will do an accounting of the benefits that are associated with transmission and distribution and generation, and we think that's going to be very useful going forward as distributed energy resources like storage and others get broader adoption on the grid, and we have to watch for these cost allocation issues. We also requested that CCAs get access to a funding stream so that we could provide these systems and receive compensation for that. Fortunately, it wasn't included in the bill, and we're currently neutral on this bill. Next bill, SB 886, Senator Pavley is the author. This bill calls for all load-serving entities to include energy storage targets in their integrated resources plans. We were able to work with Senator Pavley to include language that preserves CCA Board of Directors' jurisdiction to establish those storage targets, and we're currently supporting this bill. Next, AB 1530. The author is Assemblymember Levine. This bill is about reducing non-bypassable charges for installation of distributed energy resources. And originally, this bill would allow large commercial and industrial customers to reduce their own non-bypassable charges, things similar to the PCIA, by installing distributed energy resources. And the concern for us here is if they're not paying those non-bypassable charges, that means our customers are paying more. And we were able to work to get the bill language shifted to eliminate the ability to reduce non-bypassable charges and instead raise the cap on net energy metering for fuel cells in the state, as well as get extra incentives for the self-generation incentive program, which is, both of those things are fairly unrelated to non-bypassable charges, but for us, those elements have much fewer cost allocation concerns for our customers. And some interesting procedural movement with the bill. This bill, AB 1530, is actually currently a dead bill. That language I just discussed was pulled into a budget trailer and has since been pulled out of that into its own bill that hasn't been introduced, but we expect may go to the Senate floor before the end of the session. We're currently neutral on this bill. Next bill, AB 693, Assemblymember Eggman is the author. This was actually passed last session, and it directed the CPUC to determine whether CCA customers are eligible to participate in certain low-income solar programs. So that's the provision that was in the bill. And the specific program that it references is one that's known as Multifamily Affordable Solar Homes Program that allows multifamily buildings to get incentives to put solar on their roof. So there's really no reason our customers should be excluded from access to these programs, and we were considering getting a legislative fix to the bill. We engaged the author. They expressed support for the change, but considering that the CPUC is currently reviewing this issue and no one has expressed any opposition to CCA customers getting eligibility, there wasn't enough motivation, along with some other challenges, to get the cleanup bill introduced this session. So we'll be tracking the issue going forward, and if we need to, we'll address it in a future session. Finally, SB 350, Kevin De Leon is the author. You guys may remember this bill, Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act of 2015. This bill doubled energy efficiency, achieved 50% renewable energy by 2050. So in this session, there was a number of cleanup provisions that folks wanted to make to the bill. Fortunately, there are no CCA relevant amendments. Some of the amendments are likely to be done this session. Some are going to be kicked to next session, and we'll continue to monitor this bill and any changes that are made to it. So that wraps up the regulatory and legislative update, and I'll open it up in case anyone has questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Yeah, Emmett.
Sorry to go back to Emmett O'Donnell from Tiburon. Sorry to go all the way back to the first issue, which is vintaging and PCIA. I didn't know you should jump in and interrupt you. So what is the geographic territory that people are, that the Public Utilities Commission is considering? Are we talking about zip codes? Are we talking about counties? Are we talking about CCA territories? I'm just sort of curious as to what's being discussed there.
Yeah, so my understanding of it is CCA territories. And there's a bit of a lingering question if you have phased enrollment, how that works. But it is CCA territories. And Jeremy may add some.
So Mike is correct. The language that's in the proposed decision is a little confusing, which doesn't aid our ability to explain it. But they're not proposing for, say, all of MCE's territory to get one single vintage. What they are proposing is that each community, as we add a community, either a county or an incorporated city or town, same as the way you all identify jurisdiction, as that entity is added to our service territory, based on the time when they're added, they get a vintage for that community. And so some of them may coincide. So Lafayette, Walnut Creek, and the cities and towns in Napa will all end up with the same vintage date because they're all being added at the same time.
But but is there any credit back to the older community, the original 7?
Yeah, so there's a little bit, as Mike was just saying, there's a little bit of ambiguity in how the phasing in occurs. As those of you who were here from the beginning recall, we didn't enroll all of Marin all at once.
Right.
We started actually with certain customer classes, then added other customer classes, and then actually added a couple more communities that were deliberating longer and ultimately ended up serving the entirety of Marin. And so there is a question there of, does everyone in Marin get one vintage, or do the ones that acted earlier get an earlier vintage and the ones that acted a little later get a year later vintage? And that is why the commission hasn't voted on that decision yet. That's why it's been held for further review, because they're looking to, the language in the proposed decision did not clearly address that matter. There was ambiguity, and they're in the process of cleaning that up. What we've been arguing is that our view is that we presented an implementation plan to the commission, which they certified, and in that plan we stated our intent to serve all of Marin, and so all of Marin should get the same single vintage. The reality, though, when you actually get into one vintage or another, is that between one year and the next, there are very, very minimal cost differences. So a 2010 vintage and 2011 vintage don't matter that much. Now, the 2010 vintage should expire a year earlier than the 2011 vintage. But again, we're working on that whole other end of the puzzle still. And as some of you may recall from prior presentations, that end is unfortunately not in the near sight. It's 20, 30 years from now. So an additional year is kind of in the noise.
But this is a positive development.
This
We
is
view
a positive development, absolutely.
As opposed to what we were talking about a year ago with these charges just continually increasing.
Absolutely. The question that we all constantly are being asked is, when is this ever going to end? And the debate we've been having with this issue is we can't even agree on when it's beginning, or when is their obligation beginning. So now we can at least agree to that part and start working towards the end. So yes, this is definitely going to be a victory for us in terms of PCIA reform. I think it's really the first step of meaningful reform on the PCIA since the Green Adder was introduced through John DeLassie's hard work back in 2012, 2011. So it's been some time. I would love to just have it all done, but the commission moves at a glacial pace, so.
Thank you.
And if I might add one concrete example, one of the things we've been seeing a lot since our launch is that when customers move to a new home within our service territory, they get assigned a new vintage. And this would eliminate that problem, which, a large percentage of our customers do move year over year. So that will have a big impact on that issue and not restart the clock every few years.
John, was there anything you wanted to add on this? Because we know how involved you've been, or you just want to rest on your laurels?
I feel like we've talked about PCIA so much over the years that.
Exactly.
I think
Everything's
I'll
been
pass.
said. Okay.
It's a critical issue,
Thank
though.
you.
Yeah, it is. But I think that the takeaway is this is a positive development. There's some ambiguities I think need to be cleaned up. But the fundamental flaw of this constant revintaging, which means no end date, is being fixed, and it's moving towards a simpler system, right? So it's there's no bad news in this story.
Thank you, John. All right. Any other questions from the board? Any comments from the public on this item? Okay. Yes, please, come on up to the microphone.
Okay.
You're still under the 3-minute rule.
Oh, don't worry, this is very short. I've been looking into batteries, and I came to the conclusion, if it was a pretty steady state on our peaks, off peaks, and near peaks, time frames, there's no purpose for batteries. We're not going to be shut off. But on the other hand, if we have this dramatic shift in times of peaks, and I'm not generating power, that's where I'm getting batteries now. And by the way, Enphase, who's heard of Enphase? Oh, great company. They make microinverters, so I can check on my iPhone. I know what I'm getting, what my panels are doing. Do I need to clean them? By the way, don't forget about cleaning every 3 months your panels. They're coming out with AC batteries, which is a kind of a funny term, but they use one of their microinverters involved in that battery. It's still a DC battery, but they call them AC batteries. And they're going to release them by the end of the year, and I want to tell you, if they're going to do that kind of shifting of peak, just to get more money, it's a done deed.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to comment on this item? All right. Seeing none, let's move on to item 8 on our agenda. Thank you, Mike. And this is our fiscal year 2015-16 financial statement presentation. Good evening, David.
Great. Do I have a Is there a mouse there? Yes, I'll get it. So I'm pleased to, my name is David McNeil. I'm the finance and project manager at MCE, and I'm pleased to present the fiscal 2015 and 2016 financial statements to the board. And I'm going to back up a little. Okay. So I'm going to just cover the process by which we prepare financial statements every year. I'm going to provide a brief overview of some of the financial highlights. and the auditor's report, and then I'm going to present a comparison of the year-end results as they relate to the, compared to the budget that was approved for the year. And then I'll take questions from board members. So each year MCE prepares audited financial statements for the year ending March 31st. The financial statements are prepared by staff in cooperation with the Maher accountancy firm, and they are audited by independent auditors, which is consistent with best practice. This year, your board created an audit committee to oversee the audit process. They met with the auditor in May, and then again at the end of the audit process in July, and received the auditor's report. The members of that committee were board members McAtee, Withy, and McCaskill, and I'll invite them to comment if they would like on the auditor's report at the end. The upshot of the audit was that once again this year we got a clean bill of health from the auditor. They provided what's called, generally referred to as an opinion letter that was unqualified. So they, you can see at the top of the page, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly and accurately the financial position of MCE as of the year end. So that's a great credit to the Maher firm, which helps us with our accounting, to have sort of guided us through that process successfully again this year. Okay, to the balance sheet. I want to highlight basically. So our statements of net position consists, as you can see, of assets, liabilities, and then the difference between those two things is our net position. So you can see as of year end, our assets were 41 million. Approximately half of that is in the form of cash, and you can see that.
That might be having trouble seeing the screen. It's on page 10 of the version you have before.
Thanks. And there's a few extra copies of the financial statements around if anyone would like to have paper copies. So our cash increased by a little over 11 million this year, and that's as a result of a contribution, which I'll cover in the next page, on our contribution to our next net position that I'll cover in the next page. Sorry. So the next thing I want to highlight is what's not on our balance sheet. If you look at our total assets of 41 million, roughly half is cash, another 12 million of accounts receivable. If you look at non-current assets, we have capital assets of about $500,000. So that we don't own this building, we don't own generating assets, and so our assets are mostly composed of liquid assets in the form of cash and accounts receivable. The restricted cash of 2.2 million, that's a non-current asset, is composed mostly of a collateral which we post to our bank in exchange for the line of credit. Going down to the liabilities, you'll see that the largest item is accrued cost of electricity. This is basically electricity that's been delivered to customers but not yet billed. And that's not going to go away. And we don't, as you can see, MCE paid off its long-term and short-term note payable to the bank earlier in the year, which is a great accomplishment. So we now have no bank debt outstanding. And lastly, you can see the change in our net position, which is a difference again between assets and liabilities, almost doubling to about 29 million. So why did the net position double? That appears on the next page. This is our statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Our revenues went up by approximately 50 million to 149 million. The reason for that was primarily as a result of the inclusion of new communities in the past year. Cost of electricity went up accordingly. You can see the changes to other operating expenses. And if you come down to changes in net position, you'll see that the change in net position went up by a little over $16 million. And that fell essentially directly into the net position. We don't pay out any of our accumulated net position. It stays within MCE. And that accounts for the increase in the net position. So the takeaway from this is that it's a fantastic year for MCE from a financial perspective. Our balance sheet is in much better shape. Is in excellent shape, in fact, and that's having great knock-on effects in terms of our relationship with suppliers of energy and financial institutions who are much more comfortable with our credit now and much more willing to do business with us on favorable terms. So it's been a terrific year for MCE. At the end, you have financial statements, and then you have notes to the financial statements. I'm not going to take you through all of the notes. I will, however, highlight purchase commitments, note number 9. And our commitments, which I sort of described under power and electric capacity at the bottom of note 9, and then the total commitments are broken out by year, and the total is about $824 million. That's a big number, and that represents basically contracts that MCE has entered into to receive power in the years that you see there. Are there any questions before I move on?
Questions? Greg, did you have a question?
You just answered it. You've got 20 years from 22 to 42, and that's 400 million of that 800 million.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm clicking, but nothing's. We go to the next document. Terrific. Okay. So, this document represents, it represents the budget for MCE, what the actual results for MCE in the last fiscal year, and then the difference between the two. Second column from the left is our actuals. The third column from the left is the budget for the year. And then the difference between the two is in the fourth column over, and then the percentage difference is in the last column on the right. I don't have anything to highlight here other than effectively we met or exceeded our targets in terms of the budget. So I'll welcome any questions about that.
Questions? Seeing none. You're good, David.
Terrific. If there's no more questions, that concludes my presentation of the financial statements. And
Great.
As I mentioned earlier, the audit committee met with the auditor, and they're welcome to offer comment if they would like.
Ray and Sashi, thank you for serving on the audit committee. Anything you want to say about the process? All right. Ray, did you want to say something?
Yeah, very briefly, we had I think, pretty good, robust discussion with the auditor, and I think the general feeling I got was that the structure that we have, where we have a independent outside accounting firm, one of the representatives is here. Mahler is here. That process is very high fidelity, and so it really works very well. And the separation of the accountancy firm from the audit firm is best practice and is good. And we had the opportunity to meet with the auditor without staff there, which is another best practice. And I came away from the process, having sat on a ton of audit committees, very satisfied with the process. So.
Great, super. Thank you, Ray. Any other comments or questions? Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item, on our financial statement presentation? Right, seeing none. Mike, yeah, do you want to add anything?
Appreciate you being here. It was a great year. It was a great year financially, and
Yeah.
it's fun to be part of it.
Yeah.
The process was smooth.
Great, thank you, Mike. It's always good to have a good year financially. Yep, I think we're feeling great. Yep. All right, so that's a discussion only, no action items from us, so we can move on. Next item on our agenda, number 9, is a resolution approving amendment number 12 to the MCE Joint Powers Agreement. Dawn, did you know? Hello.
We're going to hear from Emily Fisher on this item, and I introduced Emily to you all, I think, at our last meeting. She's helping us out quite a bit on legal fronts, and is going to present this item, which is really just a clean up to our JPA agreement where we found a conflict in some language. So
great, thank you.
you,
Welcome,
Dawn.
Emily.
Yes, I learned what happens when you put your name on a staff report. You get to
stand and deliver.
You get to present, yes. So it was a good thing. My name is Emily Fisher. I'm legal counsel since May of this year. So, and thank you for this opportunity. So this amendment to the JPA agreement would resolve some inconsistency in the language that is intended to protect individual members of MCE from liability for MCE's debts and obligations, and also to protect MCE from undue risks of financial damage in the unfortunate and hopefully very unlikely event that someone decides to secede from the union. So the existing language didn't quite accomplish this purpose. And so we made the revisions that you can see. There were some additional revisions that went in this morning in the hard copy that you have, and those are highlighted in yellow. Just so the red typeface that you see there, those are insertions of new language. Strike through is what's been deleted, and then the yellow is what was just deleted this morning. So as amended, this agreement would clearly provide that if a member decides to go rogue, so to speak, it will, it has agreed to take responsibility for the negative financial impacts of its actions on the rest of the group.
Yeah.
And that's just a very high level overview of this lawyerly language fix that we needed to do. If anyone has questions, or Dawn said she would jump in if she had anything she wanted to add, but
yeah, I can add just a little bit of context. I think, there are two things that have always been very important from a governance perspective in the creation of MCE and the maintenance of MCE. In our founding, JPA agreement, our founding document, one thing that was really important to the founding member cities and towns was that the debts and liabilities of MCE be separate and apart from the debts and liabilities of MCE. That was really important because we didn't know what our financial statements were going to look like in 6 years, right? And folks weren't sure if the entity was even going to succeed. And so having that separation and that firewall was really important. So that language is ingrained not only in our JPA agreement, but it was so important to our member agencies that we actually include it in all of our standard form contracts with any service provider, that the debts and liabilities of our member agencies is separate from the debts and liabilities of MCE. So no service provider or power provider can reach through to any of your cities and towns or counties.
And if somebody gives us their contract that doesn't have that language in it, we make them put it in. So.
Yes. So we're very good about maintaining that because we know it's very important. The other thing that was very important from the beginning and continues to be important is that in order for us to enter into power supply agreements, particularly long-term power supply agreements, we need to assure that we're going to be able to pay those bills, going out many years. In order to do that, we need to make sure that if in the remote possibility that any of our member communities would really strongly want to withdraw, we would need to make sure that they are able to cover the costs that that would impose on the agency. And that provision is a provision that makes the joining of MCE a very, a long-term commitment, and that's the way we always frame it when we're talking to new communities. So I think that the reason for this adjustment, the legal counsel that was involved in drafting our original JPA agreement was working with another community choice program that was forming, and became aware of this there being kind of a conflict in the language, saying that there's never any debts and liabilities that can carry over to the cities and towns is a little bit in conflict with this withdrawal language. So this is just a cleanup to go to align with the original intent of the language and make sure that there's no gray area or ambiguity. So I wanted to state that for context. The other thing I want to clarify is that the language that was handed out to you tonight in hard copy is a slight adjustment to what was in your board packet. So I want to explain what the adjustment is. I want to thank Director Simmons for bringing this to my attention this morning, because I was able to quickly resolve it with our council. I think he made a really good point that when we introduced this revision, we were too broad in the language that we incorporated here, and we referenced language that would hold cities accountable even if they were involuntarily terminated. Again, that's another very remote possibility, but there is language in the JPA agreement that allows for involuntary termination. If that were to happen, our board would be in the decision-making position and would therefore need to weigh the cost and benefits of that decision. It wouldn't be fair to impose involuntary termination costs on a city and town that doesn't have the ability to vote on whether they're going to take that action or not. So it seemed to really reflect the spirit of our original intent. We talked it over with council, and he agreed that it really wasn't necessary to include involuntary termination. So you'll notice that the highlighted areas of the handout that you received are the adjustments since what you got in your packet. So everything highlighted, you can see it's all strike-through language that references involuntary termination. The reference to section 7.2 is all about involuntary termination, and so that's why we've removed that reference. So I think we've been able to address that issue, and I'm happy to take any other questions, or Emily.
Shashi, did you have a question?
Can you send the revised copy around so that we have
Electronically, you mean?
electronically?
Or do you not have a copy at all?
No, I have it there, but since I have everything else electronically, I'd like to have.
Yes, we will
Thank you.
send that around.
Great.
Would everyone like to see that? Okay.
Probably good practice.
I know we all get a lot of
And
emails,
probably,
but
yeah.
okay, yes, we'll send it out. Thank you.
I just want to, amendments like this, in the past, have we, as individuals, taken them back to our member agencies for approval, or in the case of Napa, to all of the member agencies for approval? Is that a step that we need to take care of?
The only type of action that would trigger that is if there was any financial commitment being made. That would actually require approval by your individual councils and boards.
Okay. And then, just as a point of discussion, this is essentially our version of the PCIA, right?
Yes.
You
It
said
is
that,
why we
right?
do not have,
PCIA.
Yeah.
it allows us to not charge a PCIA to customers.
Because it would be lump sum?
Correct.
Or and so how is it calculated? I know this is the concept, and that's all we're discussing tonight, but what is the concept of how it would be calculated?
Well,
Because as we just pointed out, that 433 million is between 2022 and 2042, and it's probably only about 50 or 80% of our overall power demand. So if El Cerrito withdrew today, I'm very unlikely since we're the best deep green participators. But I'm using us as an example. If we were to withdraw today, we probably shouldn't be responsible for a lot of that, that 433, but we would be responsible for something over the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's the language provides that the withdrawing party would be responsible for power that was procured to supply customers up to the time of their withdrawal.
So you could look, actually, it's convenient that we just heard the financial statements presented. You can look at the last page, page 20, and as David pointed out, our outstanding obligations today are $824 million. And so the proportion of your load, your city's load, would tie into what your responsibility would be for that total amount. But the other thing to factor in is we would be likely be selling that excess power on the market. So there may be, there would be some compensation for that as well.
Right. So I'm not certain I quite understand if that stuff, that power that's in 2022 to 2042, you're gonna hold me accountable for it, but you've only got 80% of your overall demand, so I don't know why we would have any obligation to that power. So unless we're oversubscribed, unless we're bought up to 105%, I don't know how we calculate what a departing entity's power demand would be, unless they're a significant, unless they're 25 or 30% of our overall demand.
Sure, well,
So-
you're raising a good point, and there are a lot of factors that would go into this calculation. Part of the analysis that would need to factor in would be tied to our integrated resource plan, where we have guidelines that we follow for how much long-term supply we need to have proportionate to our load. So we're following those guidelines, and so we couldn't just say, oh, well, El Cerrito's leaving, and therefore it's okay for us to just not be hedged to the same point. We would need to follow those guidelines as well. But I think the point you're making reflects that it would be a very complex and involved discussion.
Correct.
Hopefully, it's not something that will ever be needed. And I think the other thing that's important, and we mention this when we're talking to new communities as well, is that the joining, becoming part of MCE is considered to be a very, serious long-term commitment. If we were to have departing communities, that would have a lot of impacts on us beyond just the day-to-day financials. It could have impacts on our credit rating, for example, or our ability to procure in the market. And so it's something that we don't make easy on purpose. I think that the intent of this cleanup is just to eliminate any gray area. But to get into a detailed calculation would be a more involved conversation.
Right, I'm not just
sure
trying
it's
to do
going
a
to eliminate
concept.
a gray area. I think it's going
Can I stop
to.
you for just a second, because I think John DeLisi wanted to add something, and then we can come back.
If I
to you,
could just
Emma.
offer comment on this. So I think this concept generally is fairly common in, say, a power purchase agreement, where if there's a termination, there's an accounting essentially of gains and losses on the remaining term of the contract, and then that is payable by the kind of the party that's breaking the contract. I would envision something similar here, where here we have half of the story, so we have $834 million in obligations up to the point of departure, and then what we need to do is assign a current market value to those contracts and to those volumes. To the extent that we have above market costs, then there would be, I would assume, a pro rata, so kind of your load as a proportion of the total MCE load share assigned to you as the departing member. And that's not detailed, but I think that would be a methodology that that's used in other contexts, and I think it would be a rational way to do this.
Emma, did you?
Well, I still think in Greg's scenario and also Don's scenario that the gray area would be a very litigious situation. I can't see how it wouldn't be, considering the dollar amounts that are involved, even if it's a few $100,000. And one of the things that I've just been thinking about this issue is, what is the difference between the city town that's entering into the agency versus the customer base that's entering into the cities aren't paying a dime to this agency. It's actually all of our customers that are paying. So it's sort of complicating it in another respect by making some adjustments here, in that if a departing party left for whatever reason, and I don't envision it happening like you said, would the customers within that particular agency also have to depart, or would they still have a choice?
Yeah, well, there is a provision also in the JPA agreement that allows a member to depart from the board and pull out their municipal load, but not withdraw their community, and that wouldn't result in any type of financial impacts to the member agency.
But But the financial impacts extend to the customer base as well as just I think that's an important consideration in this, not just to cities and towns who are maybe paying their own electric bill, but otherwise are not making any financial commitment to MCE as how it was set up, as this firewall. I do see a little bit of the firewall being torn down here, and I remember you and Charles McGlashan coming to all of our boards 7 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, and emphasizing the importance of that firewall. And I think this is really an about-face on that particular issue. Because if we were to withdraw, that would create a slew of complications.
Well, but the withdrawal provision has always been in the JPA.
Right. But now you're attaching a specific monetary damages to
Well,
that
and if I
particular.
can-
No, that was in there as well.
Yeah, if I
Yeah,
can
okay,
No,
but-
you look,
comment
explain
on that
that
just a
part,
little
because
bit.
looking at what's edited, that issue was existing.
Yeah, the issues, nothing has changed in terms of substantive provisions, but the wording of this Article 7.3 that addresses these issues was not clear in reference to the non-recourse provision.
Right, non-recourse provision, that's
Right.
exactly what I'm talking about. Because
Right.
you're striking, the party shall not be responsible for any claims, damages, or liabilities arising, and you're inserting, the party shall assume responsibility for any damages, losses, costs incurred. So,
Well, before it said the party shall remain responsible, so that presumed there was an existing responsibility. So this is a little
Right.
bit actually confusing. And this may be one of those situations where no good effort to clean up language goes unpunished.
To clean up language that, of course, I didn't originally draft.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the issue there was to clarify, to just make it very clear that 2.3 protects individual members from liability for MCE's debts and liabilities unless the member has agreed to assume those debts and liabilities. And basically, the effect of this is to say that if a party's withdrawing, they have presumptively agreed to be responsible for the impact of their withdrawal on MCE and its other members. So it's.
so that party would also extend to the customer base within that
Well,
particular
the
community?
customers didn't sign they're not signatories to the JPA, so we're a little bit limited within the four corners of this agreement and how it's structured. And it's a good issue, but I'm not sure that it can be addressed since the customers aren't signatories to this.
I had a question
Maybe
over
there's-
here, and then I'm
there's some
coming
other
to you,
ways to address
Sashi.
that.
I'm
So
sorry,
is-
yeah, question here. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
my question is there a way to plan an exit from MCE where you mitigate or minimize any kind of consequence?
You're asking for a prenup?
Yeah. The second C is
They don't work all the
choice,
time
right?
I can offer a response to that.
Yeah, great.
No, I'm looking for an answer to that. Is it possible?
Greg is going to provide one.
So one thing to remember is that we're never 100% hedged out 20 years. We are really only fully hedged 100% in the next 2 or 3 operating years. So there's a very limited exposure. The customers will very likely stay unless there's some mass. Hard to believe that the customers would leave. As long as that revenue base remains, then the customer base should stay as well. But again, you're only hedging 100% for 3 years. We have, open positions out beyond 3 years that are we can easily absorb a reduction in our load. But we can also resell that power. So you're only talking about a very small window of contracting that is probably mitigatable to a great extent.
But it still begs the question of, see, I've always envisioned that the member agencies were there as a governing board to set rates, set policies, do the things that we do. And it's actually the customer base that carries the financial weight, that brings the weight to the party. And by opening up within our communities, the 4 new communities, the option for choice, they're the ones that are really entering it, and they're the real financial party in here. We're just sort of the governing party that tries to run the agency as best it can. And I'm just concerned that this language would somehow spill into the customer base as well, and that perhaps the cleanup is not necessary. I'm confused exactly why we're doing this. So to me, there's still a puzzle as to what is the real reason we're doing this.
I guess the language as it existed before, on the right hand, it said that the individual members are not liable for any of the debts, obligations, et cetera. And it said, if a party withdraws, it's liable. So trying to sort out which, what that means and when would that, what's the scope of that liability and when would it actually exist, if ever, in a way that's consistent with what it seemed to originally be trying to say. That was the purpose of the cleanup. And some cleanups aren't always clean, I guess, perhaps, but it does, I think the main issue is that it does make clear that a withdrawing party has responsibility for certain losses that MCE would incur as a result of their withdrawal.
I mean, doesn't it basically say that you're not liable as long as you're a member?
Yeah.
But you become liable if you withdraw? I mean, I think that's that was the conflict, is the JPA says you have no liability as a member. But then the old language said, when you leave, you
continue
remain
to be
liable.
liable.
So
Yeah.
that's inconsistent, right? You
Right.
can't remain liable if you're not liable. So the new language is saying you assume liability when you withdraw, because now you're causing a loss to the agency by your withdrawal, because now you're taking that choice away from the customers.
And part of it-
So you need to be responsible for that decision.
And part of the reason for it as well, I think Dawn mentioned, is that it addresses a issue of exposure to risk that would be important to creditors and
So that's the
business
reason.
partners.
It's a financial reason.
I can echo that, not because I was involved in this amendment, but the one single question we got from a lot of counterparties with us is not having any recourse if an agency or member agency left. So this does help clean up that, and they will very much appreciate that.
Okay, so no one mentioned that till just now. So that's the reason why this is.
I don't think that was the reason for this amendment, but it is a benefit that we will.
Okay, Sashi's next, then Peter, and then Bob, okay?
So,
Oh, Greg, did I skip you
Nope,
by accident?
I'll come
You'll
back.
Before?
Yep.
Before?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So Don, you said that there was a provision for if a city or town wanted to stop being a customer but not remove themselves from the service area. Is there a different name for that? So that's not termination.
Correct.
That's just, so
That
a city or town
is-
could remove themselves and not be a customer anymore and not be a member of the board, but have their city or town remain in the service area.
Correct.
Termination means we're removing the city or town from the service area.
That's correct. It simply means that you are removing yourself from the board process and removing your load. And that's a different section in the JPA.
So a city or town could say, I don't want to be a part of this, but I'll let this is the customer thing. So then but the customers can still be part of the service area. But if you say I'm terminating, you then do pull the customers from the service area. So that it does cause a financial implication that I totally hear what you're saying, Emma, and I agree with you about wanting to keep the wall there, but I think that in removing the customer, in terminating, you remove the customers from the service area, is what it sounds like to me, right? So they would no longer be able to remain customers of MCE. Correct.
It would automatically revert to PG&E.
Or in the case of Contra Costa, we could go to Contra Costa if Contra Costa started a CCA.
Don't even think about it.
I'm not thinking about it, I'm just saying that that's a realistic alternative.
What if the rates are lower?
Yeah. Exactly. And Peter, it's your turn, yeah.
That may have answered my question, but the liability of a city withdrawing would be, I thought it was just for that, the city's, electric bill, replacing that electricity or selling it. But it would also be for if Fairfax took all our customers away, and that created, a $500,000 potential liability to MCE, Fairfax would be liable for that, less whatever MCE could sell that electricity commitment on the open market or however.
That's right.
Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to clarify what the potential scope of liability is that we're talking about.
Oops, sorry, Don, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Just a question for clarification. Is this normal procedure for when you want to talk?
No, it hasn't been. We've never had this many people queue up before.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. I saw you do that and I said, oh,
Yeah, it's
did I
just
miss
getting your
something?
chit
from
on the table. It's one of those tribal practices at MCE.
I have a couple questions. First of all, thank you for doing the changes this morning. I appreciate that. And one of the questions really comes up from today. If a city decides to withdraw itself, does it have the power to withdraw all of the people in the community, all the businesses and residences in the community at that same time?
Under this provision, it would be possible. It hasn't been done before, and it'd be pretty messy, but that's what this provision is for.
Well, okay, I actually not sure that, I'm not sure, because I just, we've had an interesting time becoming enrolled in our city with some of the people talking about it. The second part, and this may be more a question to Emily than to you, but whoever wants to answer is fine. And I think you said it to me, but this is the part that, I look at 2.3, and the second last sentence says, a party who has not agreed to assume an authority debt shall not be responsible in any way for that debt, even if a majority of the parties shall assume that debt. And I interpret, I understand, when you said earlier that this language presumptively is an assumption.
Upon withdrawal.
I guess that caused me a concern in terms of, I was reading this as, we would have to take that back to the governing board for us to assume that liability. I'm going to do it this way. I don't think I have the power to make my city presumptively liable under circumstances where it's not. And so I'm trying to...
Yeah, that would have to be addressed before the decision to withdraw, because that would be an effect of the withdrawal.
So let's just assume, and I don't envision, Walnut Creek withdrawing.
You can make El Cerrito the guinea pig.
It doesn't matter, as you know. My city attorney is going to say it doesn't matter. This language says that the city never agreed to assume these liabilities. I may have cast a vote, but the city never agreed. And so that's why I'm struggling a little bit. Let me back up a second, just saying. I agree entirely with the concept of getting clarity on this issue, and with the concept also that, if you've engaged in certain contractual obligations based upon the amount of power that we are using, the load in our community, that we have some obligation there past the date of the termination. I don't have any problem with that. I just don't know that legally that I feel comfortable voting in favor of this with provision 2.3. And what got me into this was the first sentence in 7.3 starts out with subject to. The second sentence starts out with notwithstanding 2.3.
Right.
And I'll just sort of, I know, we're still asking questions, not comments?
I think you're launching
Gone.
yourself onto a disquisition, but if you want to characterize it as a question, that I'm working with you, Bob. You go, just continue on.
I think there's been enough discussion here. Would it be of interest to sort of put this back for a month so we can talk about
Oh, well,
this
just,
some more?
no, the chair
That was
was
a
going to
question.
take care of that for you, but
Oh,
first we're
thank you,
coming
sorry.
over to Mr. Lyman. Were you done with your questions?
I am done.
Okay.
And I'm going to build on that same thought, because the way I'm reading 7.3, and I'm not an attorney, and I will say that I'm having a little bit of trouble reversing the language. It basically said that we are responsible for all of our claims, damages, and liabilities arising from the party's membership up to the date of withdrawal. So any power that is purchased for our use after with the date of withdrawal, we would not be liable for, is the way I read it. And now you're telling me that we will be liable for power that was purchased for our use after the date of withdrawal. You're shaking your head, but that's not what Greg said a minute ago.
They've already acquired some of that, is what I think. Yeah.
But they haven't acquired it.
Yes,
They've only
so-
entered into an agreement. They haven't spent a penny on that power yet.
Got it.
True.
So it's not actually a demand or a damage that's necessarily occurred, and it's going to happen after my date of withdrawal. So I would argue
It's a liability.
it's a liability, but what, and I understand the point, and I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't do this. What I'm trying to say is this is a financial liability that should be that was my opening question. Should we be taking this back to our councils and our boards to make this decision? Because in my mind, this is a financial obligation, a financial change. And that's the answer I got back. My opening question was, no, we don't need to take, we can all make this decision tonight. And I'm listening to Bob and I'm listening to Emmett, and
It's going to be, I'm going to bail you out, Greg.
okay.
And I have one
Yeah.
more comment to make. And then
No,
that'll be-
oh, that's fine. Do you want to make your comment now?
Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure everyone is clear. I think John described it really well, that what we're looking to do here actually, I think, puts our agency and our member agencies in a better position than we are today. If you look at 7.3, and you look at the second line, it says, upon withdrawal or involuntary termination of a party, the party shall remain responsible for any claims, demands, damages, or liabilities arising from the party's membership in the authority. That is the language today that you all have already signed on to. It says remain responsible. And the word remain conflicts with 7.3, which says you aren't responsible. So that's where the clarification is needed. And what we're looking to do tonight is to change the word remain to assume. So that's, we can certainly take
No,
out that
I
feature.
think we're going to have a different conversation. Ray, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to add one other perspective, which is, I hope it's not sort of like dancing on the head of a pin sort of thing, but there was a discussion in the ad hoc audit committee with the auditors, and I think David, I'm going to ask to comment on this because I think it's relevant. There was some discussion of, probably half of the discussion at the audit committee was about this $800 million forward contract, right, or whatever you want to call it. And the question was, could that become, it's right now just a note, right? Could in any way that become moving onto the balance sheet in any way? You know, was there any future changes in GASB ruling which could affect that? That was a fairly robust discussion, as she will, and I think, all right. So the thing that's now concerning me is there going to be de facto some sort of note on the city's financial statements that we need to make? And I've not examined that at all. I'm guessing not, but I would certainly welcome the chair's,
Don't worry, the chair's got it.
is
Yeah, no, I got it.
that
I got it.
this is way too premature.
No, understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
And I would have to
Understood.
abstain or something.
No, you're safe. So this has really been a very helpful conversation tonight. I think it's been great to flesh out a number of these concerns and a number of our unanswered issues. And I really do think it's inappropriate for us to go forward with this item tonight, and it'd be important to bring it back to the executive committee, get further input from council, and really, I think, have a more robust conversation in executive committee. And Emmett.
Can I make a suggestion?
You sure can.
I think one of the things that would be good for the board, at least from my perspective, is if there was some sort of a withdrawal. John has sort of meshed over a potential financial scenario. Greg has meshed over a financial scenario. Why don't we have, actually, these would be the potential liabilities that you would face. Have that actually in writing so we would all know, okay, this is what we're signing on to.
I think that's something we consider.
Obviously, it can't be specific to the exact numbers, but it can be formulatic.
That could be helpful, but I also think there's the issue that you and Sashi had brought up previously about the difference between the city
That's another issue.
and the customers that we need to give some thought to.
Yes.
And really figure out how to explain that in a way, in the different alternative scenarios, in a way that's understandable for all of us. So I think there's a number of, this is why I want to carry on the conversation, there's a number of things that we really need to flesh out and make sure that we're all comfortable with it and on the same page of understanding the implications. Greg, did you
In addition to future cost liabilities that we have, there may be staffing changes which result in layoffs and the costs associated with that. So I don't want to just lose sight of the fact that we might, if there was a withdrawal of, say, 6 communities from Contra Costa left, there would be a significant staffing.
Good point
And
also.
so we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are costs associated with downsizing
Yep.
that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that this isn't an issue that we should be stepping up and considering,
Right.
and our liabilities aren't real. I just feel we need more background on it.
For
And
certain. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Ray's point is well made.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does it fit to our city's
You
liabilities?
bet. Other input from the board members at this point? Peter?
Yeah, just one comment. In reading this, I think it is an improvement over the status quo in terms of it limits the liability of a departing member. At least it clarifies it that the departing city is only liable for the costs that have been contracted on behalf of that city at the time of the withdrawal. So, since the contracts are prospective by, say, a couple, 3 years, if a city withdraws in 2016 and the contracts go out to, say, 2018, this language would limit it to that liability for that contracted power. So these other issues are certainly worth exploring, but just wanted to comment that this is an improvement, I think, in clarifying the limitation on the liability for a city that does withdraw.
Thank you, Peter. Other comments from the board at this point? I think we had at least one member of the public who'd like to comment. Please, welcome.
It's Brian Copper again. I guess I would, a couple of thoughts on this. Number one, it seems like those are, in fact, long-term contracts. And since I've been in the power purchase agreement business, there are termination fees tied to them. And so the fact that they're 20 years out, there's still going to be a termination fee. So there's going to be liabilities that are going to be probably more substantial than your 2 to 3 year window, if I may suggest. I think one way to attack this is, what is the situation? Situation presumably is going to be customer base in the town of X, right? Is going to come at some town of X city council and say, you know what, we're tired of this deal. We want a different deal. And so it seems as though if all the benefits of having clean energy in Marin and all these surrounding counties are going to the customers, then their choice to get out, that's great. You want that choice, but there's a responsibility that goes with it. So I think it's misplaced. I also think to put it on the towns. Where's their tax base for that? And if that number gets up, where's their tax base for that? So if you give people notice when they make their decision, that is the customers who are driving a town council to exit out of Marin clean energy, then they need to know that there's a cost there. Seems to me that individual customers wouldn't be paying that, on the 15th of September, but instead on an installment basis over a couple of years. You've got time on your side to work out these contract exits, but that's how you pass on that obligation, is you spend it, you enforce that cost on those who wish to depart a community of Tiburon. We want to leave. Great, there's 2,000 people in Tiburon who want to leave, and they've got this responsibility, and then they pay it down over time.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Please come up to the microphone.
Hi, my name's Craig Wildman. I live in unincorporated Contra Costa County. So if you look at Brexit, it's this huge crisis because no one knew what would happen when a country left. If you look at living in a 4-bedroom apartment, when one person leaves, there's standards for how this works. There's you've got a certain number of months left, and if you get somebody to take your place, then everybody's cool. So I want to encourage you to quantify what the liabilities are if a town is going to leave. And you could operate the CCA different ways so that you could increase or decrease the liability. But if you know what they are, then you could see them changing over time. For example, if the CCA began to own assets versus contracting out a couple of years in advance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we will postpone this item for tonight and have further discussion in the future and hopefully answer some of the questions that were brought up tonight. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to item 10 on our agenda, which is the Transportation Fund for Clean Air Funding Agreement with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Good evening.
Hello. Okay. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Estes Smith. I'm the Director of Internal Operations here at MCE. And I'm just going to summarize this item pretty quickly. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District, or BACMUD, has selected MCE to receive a grant totaling up to $60,000. And this funding would assist us in the installation of 5 electric vehicle charging stations and a solar carport here in our parking lot. This is a reimbursable grant, and when the project is complete, the charging stations would be made available for the public to use for a minimum of 3 years. And we could opt to require the public to pay for the usage. That is at our discretion. That is the brief summary, and I would like to just open it up for questions.
Questions from the board. Peter.
Was curious how much the whole project would cost, and how much of that, if you've done any estimates, then how much would that be paid for out of MCE's budget?
David, can you speak to the financial piece?
Sarah, can you speak just a little bit for those of us that
Sure.
are losing our hearing?
I was asking David if he could speak to the financial piece.
Yeah,
I can if you want.
Yeah, go for it. From the estimates that we've gotten to date, the grant would cover probably 80% or more, depending on interconnection costs and how we get service to them. But it should cover the majority of the installation.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Thanks. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't see that hand. Did you have a question?
I think we should charge.
Just for the charge.
You were going to charge our employees for plugging their vehicles into our...
Sorry.
Just no free lunch.
I want to, well,
It's a
to
tough
that end,
time,
it's
right?
open to the public, right?
Yeah.
The public could pull in and get free, I mean, once all the Tesla drivers find out where it is, they're going to be parking here and going to dinner.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't it have a meter on it?
Yeah.
At the county, we gave the first year free, and then we got really draconian, I think, charged $1.
We do have, we have an employee commute program where we provide some incentives for folks for their commute patterns, and so we may be able to provide offset cards for our staff.
Yeah, that's a great idea. David?
I just wanted to clarify the 80%, it would cover 80% of the costs of the EV chargers. It would not be 80% of the total EV and PV project. And I'll let Greg comment on that if he has some more insight into the total cost of the PV side, but I don't have an estimate of that yet.
Yeah, the grant does require that we install a solar component to this project as well. I think we really applied for an 80 kilowatt system. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but if we made a smaller system, the grant would be reduced
By half.
by half.
If we
So-
didn't install solar, we would only receive a $30,000 grant.
So without the solar array, it would reimburse maybe 40% of the cost of the system, 50% of the cost. And with the solar system, we get a higher benefit that covers almost all the cost of the chargers. But the solar array itself is going to be a fairly substantial project. That will also have to pencil on its own. We'll try to make that make sense with our feed-in tariff rates. So it should be comparable to what we're getting paid or paying for a feed-in tariff project.
So at the moment, all you're asking us to do is to agree to accept monies from an agency other than ourselves. And we still have to determine what the total cost of the project is, and maybe some of these details, such as do we want to charge for use of the EV charging station?
And just
Right?
we're
Yeah,
earlier
well,
in
the funding agreement obligates us to purchase and install these 10 EV chargers and an 80 kilowatt photovoltaic array in the parking lot. So that's what we're committing to do. And then the compensation for doing that is $60,000 in funding.
So we're obligating ourselves to spend $60,000, but assuming...
No, we're obligating ourselves to install the 10 the EV charging stations and build the 80 kilowatt solar array. That's what we're...
Understood, but if I understood Greg correctly, then we're not getting complete funding from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for the project. So the remaining cost of the project, and we don't have a total cost estimate, needs to come from somewhere else. So by entering into this agreement, are we committing our agency to pay for the unfunded portion of the project?
That's
in an
my
unknown
understanding.
amount at this moment. I'm not saying that's
Correct.
bad, I'm just trying to get real specific here, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're obligating ourselves to pay an amount that we're not quite certain of. And we also have details of the project in terms of whether we might charge for charging your electric vehicle and whether we would give, cards to employees so they didn't have to pay extra. And some of the details of how we're going to actually operate the charging stations, we have that to work out.
Yes.
Right? Are there other aspects of this project that we still have to work out, other than cost and how we're going to operate it? Other details that we need to work
Hey,
on?
if we, does this action, I would think, we take the money, and then if we as a board decide, well, we don't want to, now that we've costs, or no, we don't want to do that, then we would just have to give it back, or is there a cost
Well, I think that's an
to
excellent
giving it
question.
back?
Right.
It's actually a reimbursable grant, and so we would put the money up front. If our board, I want to also add that this is a project that is likely to lead into our next fiscal year. The bulk of the work may occur, we don't know yet, but it may occur after March of next year. If your board decides not to proceed along the trajectory as we have more information, then we could certainly walk away from this grant, not make the expenditures.
And have no penalty for doing so.
You're right, yeah, we wouldn't get the grant if that were to be the case. That's, the way it works is it's reimbursable, so we would need to authorize the expenditures and spend the money.
And that would be a separate decision than this one before us today.
And is there a time period in which we need to put in receipts and get the money
Yes,
from this
within-
grant?
Within 6 months of executing the agreement, we need to have begun taking action on the grant, which can involve submitting permit requests, for example. Within 12 months, we have to have completed the build-out of the project. So we will have 12 months from the date of signing the agreement to get the project.
So to meet those deadlines, if we can initiate permit applications within 6 months. We don't have to obtain the permit. So we have a couple of months here to do the final cost analysis and for our board to consider that and decide whether we do in fact want to go forward before we have a problem with the parameters of or requirements of the grant funding. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
David, were you going to add something? Just a second. Were you going to add something a minute ago? Okay.
I want to add something. Yeah, I think this is a great project. I think we should
Yeah, I
definitely
know,
proceed.
I don't-
2 reasons. One, we're getting free money. And number two, more importantly, what does this agency stand for? I mean, we're about renewable power and promoting renewable power and electric generation stations out in front of our parking lot. It's a great project to kind of proceed with, and we'll figure out the numbers as we go along.
Yeah, no, totally right, and it is a component that we talked about when we moved into this building. I just think it's important for us to know exactly what we're doing and what we're not doing and what we still have to figure out. So, Peter.
And along those lines, does the 80 kilowatts of solar panels, would that be built in the parking lot? Is it required as part of the grant that it has to be built on site?
Yes, that's it. The grant application modeled the project here on site.
And would we be able to build 80 kilowatts worth of solar panels in the parking lot? Is that?
Yeah, the structures in the parking lot, carport structures in the parking lot will support the 80 kilowatt system.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob.
Do we need permission from the property owner? And does it need to be cleared by the city planning department or whatever? And that's a yes?
And yes.
Yes and yes. We would anticipate it being a separate lease with the property owner, so it's not tied to the building lease.
I would add that, sorry.
Go ahead, Emily.
I would just add that the landlord has
Sarah,
already
sorry.
signed a letter agreement saying he is open to the project. He would like to approve the design.
Denise?
I just think that that is a huge improvement to the property, and it's going to be of great benefit because we're not the owners. And I'm wondering if there couldn't be some provision that we enact that talks about in the event we choose to purchase the property at some point, that the cost of that project be put into the eventual, go off the price of that we would have to give him.
That is something that we have taken into consideration and are planning to negotiate with him.
Good.
Our initial indication is not very positive.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it wouldn't be, but when you think about it, you're adding an incredible amenity that supports what the electricity use and cost is to this building. So I really think that's something that we should really fight for.
I was gonna say, Novato just built one of these, I think.
Oh,
How much
shut
did
up.
that cost?
And more to the point, how long did it take?
Let's just say it's still being painted.
It's still being painted. It was so popular, right?
Does this need to go through some sort of environmental review?
For our initial discussions with the planning agency, it's not, because it's already an established parking lot, it would just be an improvement. Wouldn't be an EIR.
So they're not an EIR, but it's a project, so I'm assuming it needs a neg deck or a CADX or something.
There may be incentives for solar installation in the city of San Rafael. I don't know.
I think it
what
would
the
be a
planning
category exempt
guidelines
project
are.
from my discussion with the city.
Other questions from the board? Comments from the public on this item? All right. Yes, come on up.
Real quick.
Oh, please go to the microphone.
How are these spaces managed? Civic Center, $1 an hour, $2 limit. They want it right next to the largest transit center in all of Marin. Not a bad place to do it. How do you control those spaces? There is no parking. Train coming in too. So how do you control it? Do you give it a 2-hour limit? How is it enforced? It's just be a big question for me.
Absolutely. Great questions. Greg?
So there are several networks that actually you can participate in. There's a group of multiple charging networks that actually will send you a text message saying your car is full, you need to move your car, we have another person that wants to reserve the spot. So these are all sorts of things that are out there.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for that.
Okay, anything else? Would someone like to make a motion to approve accepting these funds? Emmett, I think you might want to do that. Excellent, thank you. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No, and do we have any abstentions? All right, that's approved. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And we have one more budget item, our fiscal year 2016-17 budget amendment. David, are you?
Yes, I'm ready.
On this?
I'm ready to go. So, there's two, Thank you very much. There's amendments to two of our four budgets. So we have a operating fund budget, an energy efficiency program fund budget, and then we have two renewable energy fund budgets, one for local renewables and one not. So we're making changes to two of those budgets. The Energy Efficiency Program Fund budget is funded by the California Public Utilities Commission. They recently agreed to increase the amount of funding for this current calendar year. And so that increase is reflected in this budget request before you. And we will be spending an equivalent amount more on energy efficiency programs. So I think this is a good news story and recommend this one to you. The next, I'm clicking, page. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, thank you, Carol.
No problem.
The next one is an addition of a grant income line item to the operating fund budget. From time to time, MCE applies for and receives grants, and that's an activity that I wanted to break out in the operating fund budget, and largely for the reasons of transparency, just so that the board and our stakeholders understand that we do from time to time apply for these grants. The grant, the amount that you see there, the $75,000, includes a portion of this grant, which we think that may occur in fiscal 2017. Sorry, the BACMD grant. There's another TAM grant, and then we also received a grant earlier in the year to do some research related to California CCAs. So that's a placeholder number for those revenues. And then the capital, you'll see an increase in capital outlay. I know it's a negative number, but that means we're going to spend more, and for $100,000, and that reflects costs which we think may occur in this fiscal year related to the development of the parking lot.
Super.
Any questions?
All right, any questions from the board? I think that's a great idea to add the grant line to the budget. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, I would imagine that board members have a lot of experience with grants. I'll just give you my 2 cents. You know, they look wonderful on the surface, but they do come with strings attached. You can get into a situation where you're doing things you wouldn't otherwise do as a result of meeting the requirements of the grant. And I think that the organization needs to be very careful about what grants it gets into and make sure that those are consistent with what we're trying to do as an organization. So what the takeaway is, we're not trying to, you know, grow this grant number. That's not an objective of the agency, but where it meets our needs, we will go out and apply for grants.
Great,
I
all
do have
good
one
points.
question.
Yes,
So
please.
The parking lot that we just approved the grant, how do you budget the expense for that?
That's a great question. That project will take place over this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So the amounts that you see there are a placeholder for expected expenditures related to that project that will occur before March 31st, 2017. And then the other.
Which line was that? I'm sorry.
That's the capital outlay number, the increase in 100,000, and then the balance of the costs related to that project would fall into the next fiscal year.
Do we think that the parking lot might cost more than $100,000 in excess of the grant?
Well, we haven't done a full cost analysis of what it's going to cost yet, but my suspicion is yes.
Why I voted no.
I wondered. Any other questions on these budget amendments? Anyone from the public want to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, and so you are, I assume, are looking for our approval of the 3 different components of this, or
I'm looking for
are you
approval
looking
for an amendment to the operating fund budget and to the energy efficiency fund budget, and you can do those together or separately.
Together is a good idea. Would someone like to move?
So
You're moving? You're seconding? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, that's approved. Thank you,
you.
David. And our last item is any board member or staff matters that we haven't discussed? All right, yes.
I just want to
Aviva.
I've been babysitting my grandkids for 2 weeks, so I'm like finally just like woke up. Change gears, not woke up, but change gears.
Welcome to the meeting.
Welcome to
Talking in real
Anyway, I
sentences.
just wanted to correct the consent calendar. I needed to abstain. I was not here in June. I've been coming and going. And also, I will need to be replaced sometime before December because I was elected in June to the Contra Costa Democratic Central Committee, which will start in January, and it meets the same night as this one.
Uh-oh, so we will not see you after that. You have a replacement?
Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm hoping the new person will come to the retreat, because otherwise I'd be
that's a good
fine.
idea.
Oh,
That'd
that's
be
a good
great.
idea.
Yeah, super. Thanks for that heads up. Yes, Bob?
Yeah, thank you. Two things, and one is more just a question to Dawn. And for some of us that are new, if you could give us an idea, not right now, as to what are the kind of topics you're thinking about for the retreat, that would help us think about if we have something more.
Yeah.
And the second thing is to announce that on November 5th, which is a ways out, County Connection, which is the bus system in central Contra Costa County, will be introducing the first all-electric bus in the Bay Area.
Fantastic.
In Walnut Creek. It will be replacing our downtown trolley, which the city has subsidized for over 20 years and will continue to subsidize. And it's one of the best ridership routes in the system. So
It's famous. Yeah, we all know about it. That's great, Bob. It's super. Fantastic. All righty. Anything else? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Really good conversation.